kudos to Kyle Busch for a very nuanced and based and factual comment that was not sensationalized. It was just the next gen is a better defensive tool than offensive tool. Like, what a great way to articulate one of the issues here with the whole aero blocking conversation. Because it's we get lost in a lot of in the sea of what we're comparing to, and I think that's where a lot of this discourse is difficult, because when we talk about downforce, we talk about horsepower, we talk about aero being bad or good or too high or too low. Like, we're never really speaking the same language, or we're speaking from the same baseline. So, when we say, like, oh, aero blocking is so bad, well, it's always been bad. Well, what does that mean? Right? All those things can be true at the same time. But Kyle Busch articulated something very specific, and I think is worth saying again and paying attention to, is that with the next gen car, you don't have a lot of offensive plays. You can't when you're behind the guy, you can't pack air on his spoiler like you used to be able to, right?
Oh,
like in the previous cars.
Yep.
In the previous cars, you could, the car in front of you would cause you to be aero tight, but you as the challenger could also cause the guy in front of you to get aero loose, right? It just depended on how you were positioned and how you attacked the corner, and you could reshape your corner. You could try it from a different angle to where maybe the aero tight didn't affect you as well, and you came in from another angle, and now you made him aero loose, and that's how you could make a pass, right? But with the next gen, there's virtually no offensive leverage from the challenger, from the car behind, right? You can't. It's pulling up on someone's spoiler does not make them as aero loose, even close to as aero loose as the previous generation car. So in the guy in Kyle's position, Kyle Larson's position, chasing Denny Hamlin, Denny holds all the cards. He has all the leverage. He's in front, right? So he's leading. That's first big one right there.
Yep.
He literally has a distance advantage over Kyle Larson. But then he also has that aero advantage where he can aero block, and Larson has nothing he can do about it because he can't pull up to Denny's bumper and make him loose. So that was a really good point that Kyle said. I appreciated that.
It is fascinating. And, I've seen Brian Blackford, who's a friend of the pod, many out there may know from the sim racing world. I saw him commenting that there, wasn't enough ability to get people aero loose. And I was like, yeah, I get that, whatever. But the way you just conceptualize this offensive tool versus defensive, it's 100% right. Like, you can't the forever stock car racing has been that the car with more speed getting towards the other car would then have the ability to do something, whether it's in the end, the last resort, use the bumper, right? But this car, you can't even do that, really.
And so, and let me add to that. It's like, because my crusade against bumpers that line up.
Yeah.
Right? Matching bumpers. Well, that actually plays into it as well, because the car behind, but before the bumpers lined up, the car behind had a ton of leverage over the car in front because the bumpers didn't line up. So if I ran into the back of you, it literally would spin you out. Yeah. It would just lift your rear tires off the ground, and you would have to chase your car up the track. Now, I mean, the car behind still has some leverage because literally hitting someone is not easy to hang on to if you're the one getting hit. But because the bumpers line up and everything is so rigid, I mean, go tune into any short track race or any of these races, and these guys just can pound into each other, and the car in front can bear it, right? Can take the hit. And so
100%.
Therein lies the leverage in the car in front, right? In the defender. So, those are all really interesting points that Kyle made from the aero side. We talked about here from the bumpers lining up. Ultimately, Kyle ended up saying it's really easy with the cameras and the car to aero block. Honestly, if they took the cameras out of the car, that could fix it. When Bowman was behind me, I'm literally staring at my camera. I don't know if Larson said that or Kyle Busch, but
Busch.
Busch said that. So It's hard to put an absolute like what he said that would fix it. I'm not necessarily going to agree with that. We don't know what would fix, but what I am on board with is getting rid of the cameras and getting rid of the mirrors in these cars. I think that would help a ton if we, we're trying to balance safety and performance. So I don't know what role the mirrors and cameras play in safety, and we would have to consider that. But if we just threw safety out for just a second and just focused on race quality and performance, taking the cameras out and the mirrors out is a no-brainer. And then what I tweeted that caused a bunch of people to get upset.
I was gonna say, go on.
Is the next step of that. And again, I'm putting safety aside for just a second, and I'm gonna say, for the sake of racing quality and like the purity of racing quality, no cameras, no mirrors, and no spotters. Right? And now you have a very pure form of racing, drivers, cars, your senses, your surroundings. That would be very interesting to see at that level, right?
Yeah.
Dirt car racing pulls it off pretty well. Even sports car racing to some degree pulls it off pretty well.
Yeah.
They have cameras, yeah. But
super speedways would be interesting.
Think classic sports car racing, though.
Yeah,
and you don't even have to go that far. They haven't had cameras for that long.
No, you're right.
Right.
The spotters thing at this point, especially in super speedways, it has changed the game so massively that the spotters is, you listen to any spotter and it's go low, go low, go low, go high, high lane, forward back, six back, low, 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 low. It's like, it's just directing you as a driver. And that's the level you have to be at. Now, I'm not calling them out. I just think that's fascinating, to point out. I will say that I think you could go as far as to get rid of cameras and have mirrors and no spotters. And that would be probably stock car racing in its purest form.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get rid of this. And the I don't know how you do that. How do you police a spotter versus even a crew chief on a pit box could be like, hey, he's running the high lane. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've had this debate with somebody before, and I feel like I cannot remember the outcome of it. But I had this debate with somebody before, and I know that we settled on the most sensible solution to this was that we need spotters. And I'm fine with that, and I understand that. My goal of the debate at the time, and my goal of this debate now, is to explore this idea of how could, if you really wanted to, how could you draw a line in the sand to the limit to which the spotters could contribute to their communication to the driver as it pertains to competitive performance-related communication, right? Mm-hmm. If we said the spotters are there for safety, right? To notify the drivers when there's safety vehicles on the track, when there's a caution, when there's a crash, things like that, right? Now, what's funny is I said the word safety just in my tweet, and it wasn't some big, huge bunch of tweets, but there's just a couple tweets, and spotters chimed in, and they actually positioned themselves, some of the spotters that replied, that their spotting technique of avoiding cars from passing their driver is a safety thing. And I'm like, wow, that is an interesting
avoid being side by side, because side by side causes wrecks.
Avoid being side by side for my driver is the safest place for everybody. And it was that's a really not an untruthful thing to say. Not sure that's great for racing, but you're not wrong. That is safety, I guess. But again, if you could, and maybe I know we actually talked about doing this and then we didn't, but maybe we should get Freddie or Brett or one of these, spotters that likes to talk. They all like to talk, but one of these spotters that likes to talk and really try to push them to have this nuanced discussion of what would it look like if we just said, okay, you guys can no longer contribute to competition, right? It's only safety. What would happen? What kind of race would we see? right?
Yeah.
I don't think that we have to like fast track this conversation to spotters. I think that step one, it would be interesting to just. Well, hang on. I'm kind of unraveling this in real time. Would you get rid of mirrors and cameras but keep spotters, or would you get rid of spotters and keep mirrors like you suggested earlier? I don't know.
Let us know if there's someone out there listening that has a thought on that. Let us know at Friends at the Money Lap for our special 1-year anniversary episode next week. Where you
maybe we should talk about that. Maybe next week we'll get spotters on. Let's talk about since we're having a unique format next week, we'll have some fans, chime in. Maybe we'll get a spotter on. We'll talk to Ryan Truex here in a little bit about it. It's an interesting conversation.
I'd just like to say I love my spotter, Brandon McReynolds. Thank you very much. I always have to put that in.
Landon, I was hearing you saying like the idea of like talking about caution out on track and safety vehicles out on track. What does the spotter see that a crew chief couldn't already do? If you eliminate the spotter and the crew chief still had communication to the driver, he can provide information to green flag pit stops, stuff like that, counting them in.
The spotter can see the whole racetrack. So safety vehicles on the backstretch. There's a car parked on the apron. Yeah. There's a piece of debris up high.
Got it.
So there is a lot of communication there.
And under yellow, especially if you're the lucky dog and you're having to come around at speed and try to unlap yourself and that sort of thing, and there's safety vehicles, like they'll call it out and you can't see around the corner. And so there's times, and then also just in the case of catching the field, sometimes you're booking it, and your spotter's like, hey, they're off turn 2, they're still there. Oh, okay, slow it down. So it's like there is many safety aspects in that sense.
And one thing to contribute to that, because I'll prolong this conversation, that's fine. It's the main topic.
We don't have to.
Dover's kind of boring, but so I will say that, especially in the recent years, where I think NASCAR has done a good job, and our broadcast partners do a good job of this with their highlight shows during the week and during the broadcast, the spotter content between spotter and driver communication and team communication in general, and the passion that the spotters bring to the radio is good content, right? It's good for storylines and storytelling.
Alex Bowman and Kevin Hamlin this weekend.
Well, whatever it is. I mean, yeah, that was this weekend, and it's also like what the technique and the skill that the spotters in the last decade have developed. Is amazing, right? Like the shorthand that we use and the very unique terminology, and it's almost like a foreign language. It's totally unfamiliar to someone that doesn't know what's going on, and it's fascinating, right? And so it's really cool. I don't want to suggest that that I'm just throwing to just throw that out. That I'm saying that this is just that it's all just worthless, right? It's just interesting to me when you hear things from Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch, and granted they're frustrated, they didn't win, they didn't get to accomplish what they were trying to accomplish on Sunday. But when it comes to those things, I do wonder, would the racing be better? Could the racing be better? Mm-hmm. If the spotter played a different role?
It's a fascinating question. It's sort of the same thing of, I think what you're talking about with the spotter language and where they've gotten to the skill level. I'm telling you, if you take a car that's at the front of a field at the Super Speedway, especially in Xfinity right now, and with our package and the way we can still get huge runs, and you match that up perfectly what the car is doing, it will blow your mind when you listen to the spotter being like, low, 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 top, 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 bottom, middle lane's going, and it's like. It's unbelievable when you really break it down. And when that driver and spotter are in sync, it is a really beautiful thing to watch. So it would vastly change that. Super Speedway racing, I think, would be one of the largest affected by far if you change.
What does Super Speedway look? What does Speedway racing look like if the driver didn't have a spotter
It'd be
to paint
nuts.
the picture.
It'd be nuts. But
But is that
totally
is that a
different.
good thing or a bad thing? Would it be good for racing or bad?
I don't know. I think good for
I
racing.
think it would be
good for the show.
I think it would be good.
Yeah.
I think it'd be less organized.
Oh, massively. You would never know how many are in your lane. You wouldn't. It would be wild, absolutely wild at times. Especially late in a race, late for a stage, that sort of thing would just be anarchy, insane. And I think
I don't
That
know.
would be an
One could only
absolute game
dream.
changer.
We can move on.
let's put a bow on this real quick. I just want one last thing. I think the amazing part, just to go back to the conversation we're having about the offensive tool versus defensive tool, the next gen, it hit me. What we always have to remember is this car is a departure from everything we've ever known as a stock car. And it feels like every week something comes up that's like, this is how it always was in stock car racing, and we've discovered this car, it's not now. Right? And it's just like, that's what this sport is going through, and it's going to continue to happen. And,
Are we just
were
the
given,
grouchy old men?
Well, yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't know. We're going to find out, what the fans think as we go through this. But it's changed stock car racing, and it's changed the show.